Expo 2025. My name is Greg Jones. I am the content director for Motorcycle and Powersports News, and welcome to the first dealer education panel of the morning. This one here is the 4 pillars of dealership operations, building a better dealership by harmonizing sales, service, PG&A, and F&I. Got a esteemed group of panelists here to discuss the topic with me this morning. Over here, we've got Justin Quinn of DX1. We have Maggie Stevens of Powersports Playbook. We have Angela Heironimus of Live Oak Dealer Services. Tom O'Connor of MotoMate 123. And rounding us out is Alex Reyes of Broward Motorsports. So, guys, what I want to start with here is the opposite side of harmonizing these different departments and talk a little bit about silos, because I think everyone can relate to working within a silo, whether it's this industry or other industries. So I wanted to just open this up to any panelist here, but what are some examples you guys have seen having worked in this industry and specifically within dealerships of silos? You know, have some things just not gone right because of that? I think, Angela, maybe I'll start with you, because I think you had mentioned a story when you were working in an F&I department and then having to cover for the service side of things. Maybe you can tell that one.
So it is extremely important to make sure that we're all working together. And one of the dealerships that I worked at, I was a finance manager. I knew my job very well, very well. However, our service advisor had to leave. Well, how hard is it to put appointments on a book, right? So I went in there and was taking service appointments. We had 3 techs. So I put 3 appointments, because there was 3 techs, every 30 minutes for like 2 weeks straight. And what that did was create a huge backlog. I couldn't get any units built. I put the parts and service department so behind. We were like 6 weeks out, and we all had to come in at like 5 o'clock in the morning and try and work things out. So understanding a little bit about what other people's jobs and roles are within the dealership is extremely important to help harmonize everything.
Yeah, certainly.
I wasn't allowed to take another appointment.
Can I build on that?
Absolutely.
I have a dealership that they use my mobile app, and they take pictures of a bike when it comes into service. Before anybody lays a finger on it, they take a bunch of pictures. They scan the VIN, they press the button, everything disappears, and it shows up on an appraisal log that service never looks at again unless the customer says, hey, you guys scratched my tank, or that dent wasn't on my fairing, then they'll refer back to it. But it's really meant for sales departments to be able to work those opportunities. So you can see customer waiting, you can see the miles, you can see the notes that they used, or that they put into the mobile app, so you can see why the customer was in for service. And setting up service bikes for no obligation trade appraisals, right? I have a store that sold 133 new units to people with open repair orders because sales and service were working so well together. I have another store in Colorado that had 1,200 service bikes set up for the sales department. No appraisals, no conversions, right? Service was doing their job in both stores, but sales and service seem to be working together so seamlessly that everybody won. I had a quick question. Check. Yes, sir.
All the dealerships you put that into, what's your percentage of efficiency?
My benchmark is.
Can repeat the question just so I want to.
The question was, what's the rate of efficiency? Maybe where's the benchmark? I find that most stores, if they do a kind of a half-baked job, they're somewhere between 1% and 2% conversions. Our top stores are at 5%. So they're converting 5% of open repair orders to new unit sales. And you know, when I was a salesperson, my boss would say, go back and work the service lane. But I was in people's way, and it just rubbed the service people the wrong way, and I didn't know how to talk to people. So now what we do is we set it up from a data standpoint for the deal makers. They look at those opportunities first, and then they say, hey, go talk to this guy. He and his wife are in with their 18. It's got 23,000 miles on it. Like, right? They load their lips so they can go back and have an intelligent conversation with the service customer. That's where they work well together.
So I kind of spit off my question. So if you put your system into a store
I would say out of all the stores that do it, 50% do it well. The other 50, it's just service is doing their jobs to protect their butt so they don't have a customer come back and jam them up. But the sales and service aren't working it. So I'd say 50%.
So if I can, I want to build on that. So we're talking about silos, and every one of you here paid good money to learn something so you can walk away and make your businesses more profitable. I've been an owner. I know what it's like to make sure that everything you're doing has to have a return. So what I like to point out is my specialty has always been service and parts and accessories. The conversation that we don't seem to have is the fact that we're not threading it so that everyone amplifies someone else's work. A person in parts should not feel threatened because a salesperson is trying to sell a roof to a machine. A person in service shouldn't feel threatened by sales because they're looking at doing a lift kit or they're looking at doing an exhaust swap or something like that. So how do we change the conversation so that instead of it being a silo, how do we build confidence, and maybe that means we skew a little bit on how we pay people so that they get rewarded for supporting and amplifying the other departments. When you're doing it right, your service and your parts department, because they're going to see your customers instead. Okay, so let's back it up. Sales sees a customer, if you're lucky and they're super rich and they have a lot of, bikes that they buy or whatever they're buying, once a year, maybe a couple times a year. Parts and service should be seeing your customer anywhere from 4 to 12 times a year, depending on what they're buying. If they're just coming in for an oil filter, if they're coming in for maintenance, whatever the scenario is. So we have anywhere from 4 to 12 times a year to amplify how good of a job our F&I is doing for warranty. Oh, that winch went out for you? Not a problem. It looks like when you bought the bike, you got a warranty. Let me get you hooked up with service and let me get you taken care of. So that the parts person at the counter feels like they're knowledgeable, they can do a proper handoff, they can amplify the work that finance is doing, they can amplify the work that service and sales is doing. That's the whole point. If we're not amplifying each other, we have a breakdown in the workflow. Why are we, and that's the why, right? Is it they don't understand how to amplify, they don't understand what to say, they don't understand how to do a handoff. That's what we should be asking. Why do we have the breakdown? Not, the basic question is we already expect this, so how do we fix it?
Yeah, no, that's all great points. And again, so let's move on from the silo discussion and talk about how to create that better collaboration within the dealership between these different departments. Where does it start? Alex, you want to weigh in there?
Absolutely. I think silos are a symptom of a greater disease, right? So when I say that, managers, operators, owners have designed departments with separate goals, separate priorities, and separate focus. And so it's on us to create unifying goals that make sense for the dealership. This would eliminate silos. And so there's a lot of simple processes. The simplest for us would say, what are the controllables, right? We're not controlling interest rates. We're not controlling geopolitical environments. What we're controlling is our goals. How are we training? How are we cross-training departments? How are we communicating? Is there real-time communication? Are we doing texts? Do we have text threads going on? Do we have Google Sheets so that my service department doesn't get overwhelmed with prepaid maintenance pickup and deliveries? As a finance professional, I love to sell prepaid maintenance accounts with pickup and delivery. It builds on that experience. But if I completely overwhelm my service department, well, that's exactly what we got. We have a silo that's built based off of the wrong focus. So we're misaligned. And so my suggestion would be realign the goals in regards to training, communication, so that we can take control of the controllables.
Yeah, Tom or Angela, I know you guys discussed similar things, having regular meetings, having these goals in place. Do you guys want to just elaborate on kind of what Alex was talking about?
Sure. One of the dealerships that I used to work at, we had weekly meetings, weekly management meetings, and we all knew what each other's goals were, right? I knew what parts and services goals were. I knew how many hours they wanted to turn. I knew how many, what the top number was that was going to be coming out of the parts department. I knew how many sales were projected and even which salesman had which goal, right? So we knew all that, and it was our job to help push each other and help them achieve their goal, right? So when you have a customer that walks in the door and they're coming in for sales is only part of that, right? So they're going to pick out a unit. What's the next step? First of all, we got to figure out how they're going to pay for it. You've got to make sure that I get enough money for anything else I might hit her up when she goes and talks to my customer next. From there, well, you just loaded them up with a winch, a light bar, and everything else. Now
Soundproof,
service.
send it.
It's time to go to service, right? And so every single person within the dealership has an opportunity to sell.
Yeah.
And then when we oversell it, then you still have to come up with more money somehow or get some more money down, like one way or the other.
We'll
You got to
find
find
it.
more money, right? So we got to make sure that everybody has an opportunity to sell within the dealership.
As far as it relates to communication, I think it starts first thing in the morning. There's a dealer in the room, Scott Fisher, who's a great operator. Sorry to call you out, Scott, but your team has some of the best morning huddles that I've witnessed. And it's very regimented. It's a certain amount of time. It's conducted by one person, but that person changes because the leadership models what that morning all staff meeting looks like. So you can't get into the weeds and things like that. They broke it down into 3 areas. Number one, they talked about the business, each department, what your rate of travel was. Now everybody's in there, not just the department manager, but the frontline staff. Everybody was in these all staff huddles in the morning. And they talked about the business first, which was rate of travel. Where are we at as it relates to our goal and how much of the month is gone? Number 2, give each other kudos. Who did a great job yesterday? Who helped out somebody else? Maggie, I would just want to call Maggie out. I had this really tough customer in sales. She took him over to the parts department, sold him $1,800 worth of stuff, and he couldn't like us more. So I want to give kudos to Maggie. That kind of communication starts to break down barriers and silos, and it shows respect for your fellow person, right? Because now I have a better understanding of what each person goes through. And then the third thing was, hey, how are we going to be successful today? Here's who's coming in. I want that person to see Alex. It's a perfect opportunity. You've got a 2 o'clock, right? What do we need to know about that? Hey, you've got somebody coming in, Justin. They're going to go on a VIP tour, and let's make sure that we introduce that person to all the right people, right? And then my favorite part was they had a bell, and whoever had a great day the day before rings that bell and starts the day of business, and everybody breaks up and goes out and does their job. It's very impactful when you see it, because they're not just loosey-goosey meetings. They're very definitive, defined, timed, and really impactful.
I love that. I think you nailed the head right there. Regimented, routine, habitual meetings are incredibly important. Roughly 45% of the things that we do are habitual. And I was cautious about bringing up habits in Vegas, but we're here, so mine are Oreos. I have a habit that I created from my finance department to my sales team, and it's called a save a deal. And so essentially, after our morning meeting, after we bring out bikes, we talk about the previous day performance, deals that were turned down, deals that were not turned down, and we come up with different ideas of how to structure a deal. So some banks have 80% equity calls, some banks don't, additional money down. And what this has done is it's bridged and aligned the lack of information from finance into sales. And it's not that finance doesn't like sales and doesn't want to put deals on board either. This practice and this habit has created us to find additional deals.
Yeah, so I think it's very important to elaborate the fact that you really can't over communicate in these situations, right? Having that open communication, and it's not just the department heads, it's everybody within the dealership, right? It really makes everyone feel involved. It can't be a weekly thing, because then stuff slips through the cracks. Having something daily.
Yeah,
Justin,
maybe
do you
I
want to
could
elaborate?
jump in here. I think, everybody's saying the right things. I mean, if you're struggling with communication within your dealership, a lot of times that has to do with some form of lack of leadership, right? How many times have we thrust people into management roles, or even in our business, we're learning what it means to really be a manager. And in my situation now, being a product manager in a software company, I spent 20 years in dealerships, but I talk with a lot of dealers, I think one of the biggest things a dealership can do is start to dictate some of that. You know, a lot of time a dealership will be struggling and will go in and they're always trying to find a way to marry their business, in our case, with their software. And that's where I can really see where, aside from software, where a weakness is in a dealership, whether they're not using it right. But ultimately, when I walk into those dealerships, somebody's saying, fix it. You know, so I think you need to take a look in the mirror if you struggle with those areas and start to define what your company should be as a leader, and then dictate that. That way, when people come in, you know, these meetings we're talking about, time box them. You know, I really believe they should be happening in the morning. When you're doing your ordering in the afternoon, your parts managers, your purchasing people should be sitting with your service manager. They should both be intimately understanding what each one's trying to do. So I think, you know, again, it's hard to just meeting all day, but if you're really trying to fix a problem, I think it's a great start to holding those processes accountable. And a week can go by fast in a dealership, right? So it's great to find out at the end of the week something happened, but a week just went by. So I think, you know, understanding what's happening daily is a big key to getting towards those weekly goals.
So one thing I just want to micro add, again, all of us, we met before the panel to make sure that what we told you guys, you walked away with valuable knowledge to implement. So one thing I want to emphasize, everyone's talked about meetings. Again, I've done owner life, I've done dealer life. You're exhausted, it's middle of the season, you've been working way longer than your normal hours, and your brain is toast. When your brain is toast, one thing that you can rely on is your North Star. So what I used to do when I was an owner, when I was a parts and accessories manager, I always had a North Star for the year. So it didn't matter what was going on during busy season, didn't matter what was going on during slow season. We had a North Star for the year, and normally it was $1. So sometimes it was a overall dollar amount for the department. Sometimes it was a number of widgets sold, whatever the big metric was, but it was for the year. So everything that we did throughout the year, we'd circle back, well, does this support our North Star? And it kept us on track, because sometimes there'd be a cool program that would come up or something else would come up, and then we'd stop halfway through the month and realize, wait, that's taking us off track. Our North Star is this. We gotta refocus. And when you're exhausted, your North Star will save you. So that's one thing that you guys can implement today. And then the other thing too, when you're working with, okay, so most of us up here are very educated, management, higher ups, we're very knowledgeable, we're very comfortable. But what happens when, like, your desk jockey gets a question and they freeze? What happens when your lot porter gets a question and they freeze? I've always cared about everyone should have one or two phrases that can answer the question and then redirect them back to the expert. So if someone walks up to a service writer and they're like, how does this pre-paint maintenance plan works? What are the nuances of ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba? And they're asking the question that maybe they know enough to be dangerous, but they don't know the nuance. They should feel comfortable to be like, well, prepaid maintenance in general is blah, blah, blah. If you have more questions, I can either get you with Alex or I can get you with the service manager, and we can get you those details. A, you're threading the other departments in, and that person doesn't feel like an idiot. And I'll be honest, the people at the lowest level should feel comfortable to answer a conversation, because if they cannot answer a conversation, when that customer is asking them what they feel is a basic question, they're gonna get mad. They're gonna be like, wow, they didn't even take the time to train the schleppel. Why am I gonna bother? You know? So making sure that, and they don't have to know everything. Like, don't overload them. Give them 2 sentences. And then tell them who to point it to. That's all they need, and they'll be so thankful. And then that person in turn, again, their job is not related to finance, but they're going to feel valuable, and they're going to know that, hey, what I do actually matters and supports everyone else in the dealership, and it builds trust. So when there is a bigger question or there is a bigger issue, you know, they've gone to Alex 50 times that year so far, so asking a big question isn't that big of a deal, because they've already built that trust and that gap.
We gave them a simple formula of acknowledge, respond, and move on.
Yeah.
I'm glad you asked me
Yeah.
that question. I can see why that's really important in your decision making. In fact, would it be all right if I introduced you to one of our business managers who can answer all your questions, and much better than I can? In fact, here he is right now, Alex.
Yeah.
Right? Just how to segue out of it. And if you arm everybody in every department, it buys them time, right? You know, I'm glad you asked me that. I can see why that would be an important decision. In fact, let's get you in front of one of our experts who can answer all your questions.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Maggie, I really love that term, threading, you know, the process through different departments. I think that's really crucial. So what are some of those other things that folks here listening to us can take back to the dealership like that? You know, how can they take those meetings beyond just that communication and not making it turn into lip service, but actually meeting the goals that, Alex and you guys, the other people up here have talked about?
So one thing I've seen in reality, again, I love me a good meeting. I love me good metrics. Give me numbers all day long and I will geek out. My lower level guys despised all of it. They looked at me. They did not care how much money I bought for donuts, for coffee. I customized their breakfast order. I'm like, what do you want? You've got a $20 budget. No one cared. My guys underneath me did not give a hoot nanny. What they cared about was, how does this impact my job and how does this impact my paycheck? So I would thread specifically, by answering this question, this is how it reflects your paycheck. By answering this question and referring them here or following up here, it makes you look like an expert, because I feel that if I've hired you, I am branding you as an expert. Now, you might be an expert in dirt bikes. You might be an expert in whatever the silo is. That's fine. You're my expert in that. But I'm also going to thread you with the knowledge that you can go ahead, when you start to get out of your bubble, you can go hand it off, but not worry about having it impact your paycheck. If someone at your lowest level is worried about answering a question and it's going to take away a sale from them, they will subconsciously sabotage it, because at the end of the day, they have to protect their paycheck. That's how they make a living. That's why they're in your dealership. So how do we, whether we tweak, whether we look, whether we just explain it a little differently, how do we thread that conversation of answering the question makes you the expert? Doesn't matter that you're the lot porter, you're the expert, but it also boosts your paycheck, because the more bikes you're pulling around, the more job security you have. Maybe we don't have to lay you off during slow season because, hey, look, service has been, up 20% the entire year, where we had to lay you off last year because you've been really helpful. We now don't have to lay you off this year. So you have to thread it back to their money, and that'll motivate them. And that'll at least anchor in why this is important, and it won't just go over their head. Because I'm telling you, get a bunch of texts in the morning on a 8 a.m. morning, whatever it is, and I don't care how much coffee or donuts you give them. If it is not, how are they going to make more money and turn more billables and not be less stressed out? They're not going to absorb it. And I want them to absorb.
Well, and I think it also goes along with 2 additional items. Accountability. Just like we said, we can talk all day long in these meetings and we can have a great plan, but if we are not holding our people accountable to that, then what was the point of spending the 20 minutes in the meeting this morning going over everything that we wanted to do? We have a lot of dealerships that have a training program. They have a new hire, they get put in the system and they have logins, they got an email, and there's your desk.
Yeah.
And that's what they got. That's it. And so we have to make sure we have a robust training program for sales, for parts and service, for the service advisor that had no business sitting in that room for that afternoon. There has to be accountability for each manager to hold their people accountable, but also to get in there and do what they expect. You can't sit there and tell the parts and service guy, hey, I want you doing this and this and this, not showing them the best way to do it or helping them succeed in that. They shouldn't be thrown to the wolves because they've been there 3 days now and they know how to log into Lightspeed. Like there is or DX1. There is so much more to it than that. Thank you. And so we have to make sure that we are holding our management accountable for their people's actions.
Yeah, absolutely. And so you brought up DX1, and Justin, I did want to ask this question, because a lot of dealers are using software, and how can they better use it to their advantage in this scenario? How can software help, bring departments together?
Well, kind of like we just talked about, you have to learn how to use your software. I mean, my main role in my company is working with you all every day. Every day we'll get a suggestion. Hey, I need this tool. I need something to help me run my business better. And so we'll reach out and we'll start talking and go through what I call the use cases. And next thing you know, the tool is right there in our system. So it's just they weren't quite sure, or that person, how to take what tasks they're trying to get done and ultimately dive through. All our systems can be very advanced, right? And we have very different types of businesses using different types of tools. So I think, again, trying to explore it, it's hard when you have business every day. We talk about that grind. It's kind of the same thing every day. We're selling parts, we're selling service, and it just seems hard to break away to train or come up with these programs. But, ultimately you have to dedicate some time. Again, we talk about these meetings. It doesn't have to be a meeting, but we set training time aside each week. And we've had success with cross-training roles, you know. As we talked about, it's great if you don't do service and all of a sudden you're thrust into a service role, you all of a sudden have a different view on what that other side's trying to do, and ultimately that can break down a silo really fast. Oh, I understand. And then the communication gets better, especially if you're switching those two people up. Now we know why we aren't communicating as well, or the things we might be able to do to understand our job better. So, you know, I think those are easy things to do right away, is just train, and don't stop. That's ultimately one of the things. We can pick it up, do it for a month, and then, as most of these things we're talking about, they kind of fade away. So again, that theme of accountability.
Yeah.
Have training become a habit.
One thing I like to add, I've never been a fan of, if anyone has worked a counter or a floor and you have your people coming to you and they're like, how do I do this? How do I do this? At some point as a manager, you're going to get frustrated. You're going to be like, if they ask me one more question, I'm going to lose my ever loving mind. So like Angela was saying, it doesn't have to be hard. It doesn't have to be time consuming. All of this can be fast and simple. If we're taking more than 10 minutes to do something, our process is broken. So if training, so say DX1 comes out, one thing I used to do, we had a living playbook, I called it. And we would take all of that knowledge and we would put it in the playbook. So my question before anyone was allowed to ask me anything, did you look at the PRG? No. Well, go Google the PRG real quick and go see if it's in there. If it's not, I will stop what I'm doing. I will add that resource in for you. So they took the knowledge and they trusted the knowledge PRG document that I had created for them. Mind you, it was 50 pages. It was 50 pages, hyperlinks, videos. But every time DX1 came out with a training, I took that link and I put it in the PRG. Every time F&I came out with something new, I took that and I put it in the PRG so that they didn't have to rely on me to answer a question. They could go to that document. So say I'm sick. Say I have an emergency, say I'm on vacation, they're not calling me or texting me and saying, how do I do this? Go look at the PRG. So training doesn't have to be time consuming, especially when you're on the floor, you don't have time. So look at your benchmark, look for about 10 minutes. If it's over 10 minutes, maybe that means I used to go and I would screen record what I'm doing. I would take the video link, I would upload it to YouTube, make it private, take that video link, put it in my PRG, and then I would let my guys know, hey, it's in there if you need it. It doesn't have to be complicated. Technology is such a beautiful thing. We are so lucky because most of us in this room know what life looks like before a cell phone. We need to use that and have that amplify our life and make it simpler and easier so that the brain juice that's left is for more complex things. Looking at customer reporting, looking at our profit margins, looking at where we have missed opportunities. Save the brain juice for that, not like, how do I create a ticket?
Absolutely, and that's well said. So if you guys don't already do stuff like that, I highly suggest putting that type of document together and making sure that your whole dealership's aware of it and how to access it and use it. Definitely very impactful. Something I wanted to do is bring it back full circle. Again, not to harp on silos, but we are talking about departments that operate very differently, right? So in this scenario, is it something where dealerships should be working on harmonizing this stuff simultaneously, or is there a certain department or two that makes sense to start with first, in terms of, to use your term, Maggie, threading it to one another?
I would be biased and I would say go where you're leaving the most money on the table. So if that means you're leaving the most money on the table, and every dealership's different, right? So if I gave a blanket answer of it always should be sales, well, what if that's not true? What if your sales department is so right and tight that there's nothing to change? But maybe your service department isn't so right and tight. So I would say to think of the health of your benefit or your bottom line and your money, because that's the whole point of this, right? It's your money. Go where you're having the most issues. Fix that one first, because you're going to have the best bang for your buck. You're going to see the ripples the fastest of success. You're also going to see, oh, I implemented this and it really didn't work. So go there first, spend time, spend whatever's appropriate, 3 months, 6 months, a year, rebrand it, make a new North Star, again, anchor that terminology into them, make that document for them so that they're not asking you the same dumb question they've asked you 50 times, give them the sentence or two that they need so that they can do the handoff to another department. So fix your most leaky valve first.
That certainly makes sense. Anybody else want to weigh in on that one?
I think it's important for you to sit back and evaluate and really take a look at what you want your dealership to look like.
Yeah.
What are the most important things that you want your customers and your employees and everyone around you, what do you want to be known for? And then, like she said, figure out from there where you have the most opportunity for an immediate gratification for increases in your numbers. What's your immediate return on investment? Where can you focus your time and energy to get the biggest return, and then bring in more departments from there?
All right, we're going to open it up to the audience for questions in just a minute. But before I do that, the panelists here have given a few examples and things that you guys can go bring back to your dealership. But I want to ask if there's anything else that you guys want to suggest people leave here with and go back home and use and implement, if there's anything additional.
I like to use, as a manager of the store, I like to use a job motivation worksheet. So it had a list of all the reasons why somebody worked at that dealership. Why do you work here? Whether it's the brand, it's the sport, whether you just want to get out of the house, whether it's been a lifelong passion, whether you've been on two wheels since the time you were 5, whatever it was. But as a manager, I found that when I give that to departments, they start to understand what motivates each employee. And I think people need to be motivated. I'm not a money motivated person. I like the money, but I want recognition. So if I won the call of the week and got free lunch on Saturday because I had the best sales call, or I put the most creative deal together and I got the deal of the week, that was more important to me than the commission, right? So once I understood as a leader how to manage my teams, I think that made a big impact on making everybody more effective as a communicator and as a director, right? So it's a job motivator worksheet. I'm happy to email it to anybody that wants one.
I love that. I think understanding people's why is incredibly important, because then you can structure and incentivize them towards what moves them. If I'm able to share any actionable habit to kind of bridge the gap between departments, it would be action. A lot of times at events like this, or speaking to your colleagues, you're overloaded with information, and what happens is you get paralysis by analysis. And so don't get stuck there. I would say start small and start with action. So morning huddles, you may not have it implemented. You may want to start with Mondays and Fridays and kind of see where it goes. My suggestion is in each department, you want to start subtly. You don't want to overwhelm any one department when you get back to your shops, because it'll send the wrong signal. That's kind of where I'm at.
Excellent. Anybody else? Good?
Sorry, just wanted to add. So I did not come from this industry. When I got into this industry over a decade ago, I was like, cute, that's a tire, that's a spark plug. I knew nothing. My background was IT project management for healthcare companies. So don't assume that just because they didn't grow up wrenching on a bike, that they might not develop a love for it. I out geek on this stuff that it's so crazy that even my husband's like, can you please stop talking about this? Go talk to someone else. Like, I'm bored. I don't want to talk about motors. I don't want to talk about new tire releases. So I would say, don't assume that just because they don't have, practical experience doesn't mean that they're not willing to learn. And then the other part of this too is, when you're an owner, it can be so overwhelming. It can be stressful. It can feel like a lot sometimes. So I would say your North Star definitely helps. And the other part of it too, what keeps us all in business is profit margin. Maybe, some of your lower employees or other employees are not motivated by money. That's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But I care about making sure your department or your dealership or whoever is profitable. Because if you're not profitable, if interest rates continue to go up, if there's a recession, you're SOL'd to keep it PG. So if you actually have, whether it's money in the bank or solid profit margins to handle those waves, that's what I care about. I want to make sure that these places are in business for more than 3, 5, 10 years. Like, why isn't the normal 20, 30, 40 years? Profit margin. So I care about making sure you guys are profitable so you can go home at night and actually pay all your bills.
Absolutely. That's definitely what keeps everyone in business. So, all right, guys. Well, again, thank you so much. If you plan on sticking around, we're going to be talking about dealership culture next. So if that's interesting to you, please stick around. So thanks again.
Thanks, Greg.
Thank you.